Hey, everybody. Welcome and thanks for joining me on my monthly threat webinar. My name is John Clay, VP of Threat Intelligence here at Trend Micro. And this is my February 2022 webinar. We're going to be talking about cybercrime campaigns. Before we get started, I wanted to give you a couple of items to think about. One is there is a Q&A button. You can ask me any questions you have at this time. I'll cover those at the end if there's time. If I don't get to your question, I will follow up outside of the webinar with you afterwards. Also, I just wanted to highlight, obviously, there's some situations going on in the world right now, and everybody's probably in different states. I hope everybody is doing okay, and we'll keep our prayers open for the folks over in the other parts of the world. Before we get started here, I am going to stop the video because I do have some technical things going on, but also be aware that after this, you will receive a link to the slides, as well as a link to the recording that you can share with any colleagues that you might think would benefit listening to it. Okay, so why don't we get started here? As I do every month, I try to cover some information that comes from my Friday blog series called This Week in Security. Every Friday morning, I publish this blog, and it gives you a recap of articles, both Trend Micro articles as well as articles from the industry on what happened over the week. And so it kind of gives you a synopsis of things. So if you want to keep abreast of all the news and so forth, you can just go and follow that blog. Like I said, every Friday morning, we publish those. But I wanted to highlight a couple of them from month in review that we had. The first one is a research report that we published on SMS personal verification accounts. So a lot of criminals now are actually getting access to compromised Android phones that they utilize to obtain a SMS verification code. So when they sign up for an account, say a Facebook account or a Twitter account, fraudulent one that they want to do, but they need a SMS verification code, they'll just utilize this service that's being offered in the underground. So good report if you want to take a look at that. The second one is a ransomware spotlight. We've been doing a series of these. This one is on Lockbit. So good article and an infographic that gives you some information about this ransomware. Another one is why cyber change outpaces boardroom engagement. This was an article written by one of my colleagues here at Trend, who talks a little bit about the board and what the board's role is and how you can help get more traction with the board around cybersecurity and the need for that. I know in my cyber risk index every 6 months that we do a survey, and this is one area that a lot of organizations are concerned about, that the board isn't taking security as seriously as they should. Another one, investigating APT36 or Earth Carcadon's attack chain and malware arsenal. So this is an in-depth report about this APT group that can give you some information about what's going on with them, what are their TTPs, their attack chain, etc. So if you're interested in seeing that, that's a good one to take a look at. And then the last one is defending the supply chain, why the DDS protocol is critical in industrial and software systems. This is a research report that we did, and I think a lot of people may not realize how widespread the DDS protocol is used out there in the world. And we found a lot of security holes and gaps associated with that. So a good article to take, or a good research report to take a look at if you are interested. All right, so let's get started here. Again, today I wanted to talk about Cybercrime Organization. So the first part of this presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about how they are organized and some of the shifts and changes that we're seeing in these cyber criminal organizations. And then I'll come back and I'm going to talk about two ransomware gangs and groups that are that kind of follow the model that we're going to be talking about and are very active out there in the world. So the first I wanted to highlight, here's a couple of dollar amounts. They're $196 million and $83 million. A bit of a thought experiment here. I'm going to give you what this means a little bit later, but for now, just kind of keep those numbers in your mind. You know, the answer is probably going to surprise you. You know, one of the first questions that we get from customers, why do I need to care about the different attack groups and threat actors as long as you block malware? Who cares? So let's reflect a little bit on that. When you look at who we are protecting our customers from, you talk about the attackers today, right? So this is typical pyramid shape that you see out there. They kind of break it down into the three different levels of skills that are out there. The first one is at the bottom are the script kiddies, right? These are beginners, beginning hackers. They're often not really full criminal in nature yet, at least not professional about it. And they still very much learn as they go, right? You can imagine kind of the classic image of the teenager in the hoodie in their parents' basement here. That's kind of what everybody thinks about when they think about script kiddies. Above that, we have our mid-level attackers. At this point, they're probably already in the field for criminal gain. They're likely operating botnets or similar criminal services and making what they would, certainly be considered a good salary in their part of the respective regions. One of the things we see a lot of people getting into cybercrime because in their region of the world, maybe the salaries for regular jobs aren't that high. So cybercrime can pay pretty significantly. Many of those behind the botnets are the likes of like the Mirai variants and several, with several thousand machines that would fall into this kind of a category. And right at the top of the pyramid, we've got the elite criminals. These are the folks who have moved up in the ranks and they're now operating as fully professional. They're in international organized crime syndicates are part of this. They'll have advanced business models, and that's what we're going to be talking about here in a little bit. And they can have ties to either traditional organized crime, such as the mafia or the Yakuza. And it's all really the purposes of money laundering, right? Think of the likes of like Emotet, TrickBot operators. These would fit into those, as would most of the nation's state actors. And that's, very apropos is what we're seeing in the world right now. So let's dig a little bit deeper into these different groups. When you look at the low level, the script kiddies, you're going to see them mostly developing and utilizing rats like Dark Comet, tools like crypto miners. Overall, nothing real advanced in what they are utilizing or building themselves. Moving up in the tier is where you start seeing criminals building bots, especially via automation, like automated worms and behaviors like Mirai we mentioned earlier. At this point, automation and code is really the key differences. So they're much better. They're better coders. They tend to automate a lot of their capabilities, advertising in the underground markets. And then finally, at the elite level, we see much more lateral movement tools or tools you'd commonly associate it with pen testing and red teaming. So these are the folks that are living off the land, right? They're utilizing the same tools that you use within the organization. Also, you're probably no longer really defending against code. You're actually defending against a highly skilled human attacker, right? These people tend to be much more hands-on. And they're actually manually attacking you. Now, when we focus on malware protection, we're doing really a good job as an industry of protecting against these two layers. You see the script kiddie in the mid-level. But that approach starts to struggle when we have to deal with the real top layer of human-driven attacks, right? But that's generally okay, right? Dealing with those top-level intrusions, we can bespoke approaches like incident response or an MDR, XDR for those. Surely those approaches do not scale as well, unfortunately, because they are human intensive on our side as defenders, but they're also less people at this level of criminal. But you know what? Is that really true? When you look at the pyramid again, now think for a minute about your own careers, right? All of us have been in our jobs probably for quite a while. Some of you younger folks, maybe not as long, but hopefully all of us have grown our skill levels. We're better at our jobs today than we were, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And of course, criminals aren't very different. Their skills are going to continue to increase over time, unless, of course, they may be arrested. Then they're kind of stuck in a jail somewhere where their skills may diminish, obviously, as technology changes very quickly. That's something that none of us hopefully have to worry about, because even if you're the worst performer in the history of, say, Trend Micro, it's unlikely our annual review will feature my boss saying, "I'm really sorry, it's just not working out. We've decided that prison is the next best step for you." But so we don't have to worry about that. But the criminals certainly have to. But often that sort of conversation happens for cyber criminals. So here's a screenshot of the most wanted list of FBI cyber criminals. In total, there's only about 95 people listed on it. And to make it worse, none of these are arrested, right? So they're still out there in the world doing damage, perpetrating crime, et cetera. Otherwise, they wouldn't be on the wanted poster, right? But also, these are just the ones that law enforcement have been able to figure out. That is a tiny percentage of the overall list of cyber criminals that are attacking folks out there today. So what does that mean, right? It means that the pyramid is changing to become much more top heavy, because nothing is slowing down the criminal career development. The script kiddies are becoming mid-level actors. Those mid-level actors are crossing into the elite level. So in reality, our customers are being hit by more of these top tier threat actors. But does that really matter if we just block malware? Let's look at a new ransomware family that emerged in 2021 called FiveHands. A couple of people published on it. This CISA report you see here is quite good on the technical details. If we go down through it, lots of good technical analysis of the malware, all in an excellent analysis of this brand new ransomware. But if you think about it, was it actually new, and could we have seen it coming? It actually turns out that this was not new. After we did some analysis, we noticed that there were some code similarities and a link to several older ransomware pieces, namely another ransomware called Hello Kitty, and before that, RagnaRocker. So as an industry, we could have maybe proactively detected this, but you know what? Is FiveHands the same thing as Hello Kitty? Or is it just Ragnarok, really RagnaRocker.c, or Hello Kitty was .b? When we focus on the malware, it's a bit harder to tell for sure. But what if we look at the group behind this? So let's start looking at the more from a perspective of the groups that are doing these attack campaigns. So we'll name this one temp_Kraken for now, following our own internal naming convention. But we would call them FiveHands. We could call them FiveHands. But remember, FiveHands is just one of their malware. So this group actually has more than just that one FiveHands malware. They'll use other malwares out there. So you may not want to name them just by a single piece of malware. There's a number of threat actors that have been tied to this group. I've anonymized this to show their roles, but let's call out a few of them here today. So if in that lower left, you see one actor who developed the PowerShell-based malware for the group, including a tool to delete tape backups. So again, in a ransomware attack, a lot of times they want to kill the backups. So he actually wrote code to do that as part of their PowerShell malware. Another actor was brought in by ex-member 1. So over on that right side, you see there's some ex-members. So people come and go in these groups, just like people come and go at your business as well. So before they had a falling out with the group leader, he's the person responsible for developing the group's keylogger, as well as a credential stealing malware capable of pulling details from just about any common software or browser. This actor, you see here, the main ransomware actor, seems to be the principal developer of the FiveHands, Hello Kitty, and possibly other ransomware strains the group used. The code base seems to be built on top of an earlier CryptoLocker source code that the group leader bought when he was setting up the business. So he was using some old code and he repurposed that code. So again, when we look at it, is that FiveHands malware anything new? And then lastly, there's a whole bunch of network intruders who tended to rotate a bit over time. One team of them is under the mentorship of an experienced network intruder team lead, whereas others appear to be contractors. Now let's try a bit of a what if experiment. Imagine that there was a row in the group and part of it split off and decided to leave. Let's say that these actors decide to leave, and it makes sense for the team leads to go with them, right? So you've got the network access team leads decided, and the network access folks decide to leave. We'd effectively now have two groups. Let's call them the red group and the blue group. They go off and produce new malware. What are these new malwares then, right? Are they Hello Kitty.d or .e or maybe FiveHands.b or something new entirely? We don't know, right? More importantly, since we want to detect this new malware or the future, can we tell already what the malware tools will look like? If you just look at the code, I'd be surprised if you can predict what new versions will look like with any kind of certainty, right? Could it be a minor rewrite or have drastic changes? But what is we think, in terms of groups and campaigns instead, right? The red group would likely obtain initial access via the direct human network intrusion. They'd use PowerShell-based droppers. They deploy keyloggers to gather corporate data, but they would likely operate a leak site model, not direct sale of the stolen credentials. They will keep doing that because that's what worked, right? From their temp crackhead days. The other group, though, would likely continue the ransomware business, right? With a new rebranded version of Hello Kitty or FiveHands, as the underground probably does not trust them much after they split, right? So they have reputations to uphold and deal with in the underground market. On our side, we'd see their initial intrusions all over the place, right? Why would that be? Probably they need to build up their affiliate program. Their pen testers, the network access team lead ran a tight ship with standardized playbooks, but 20 different affiliates will have their own ways of getting into a network. So phishing, drive-by, phone calls, RDP, you name it, it'll probably be utilized. It'll be very noisy. And as a result, all our industry will have good detection for this new malware because it'll be all over the place. So you see the power of thinking in terms of attack groups, right? So let's think about attack groups instead of the malware alone. You need to understand the malware. You need to understand the TTPs, but that's a baseline, right? The malware is the baseline. You've got to build the actor knowledge on top of that. So tracking the actor we can predict the next steps in a way that's simply impossible to do when we just look at malware only. And being proactive like this is critical. You know why? Let's come back to this number, right? These two figures. So on the left, we have losses from a single cybercrime attack on a cryptocurrency exchange called Bitmart. So they made 196 million. Think about the criminals. They don't have a lot of taxes to pay. They don't have a huge amount of overhead. So they're going to be, their margins are going to be very massive. So they're going to take home most of that money. On the right is Trend Micro's net income for Q3 of 2021. So, you know, our CEO has always been quite visionary, Eva Chen. And one of the things she's always told us as employees is that our competitors are not our peers in the industry. They're actually are the attackers, the hackers, the cyber criminals out there. And you can see why. I mean, these organizations now are getting much more elite. They're much more professionally run. All of that is going to comprise it. So let's look at a couple of different cybercrime campaigns now that kind of follow this kind of model. So the first one is we're going to be talking about is Lockbit. I mentioned that one earlier. We did a write-up on it, but I wanted to walk you through some of the information about this ransomware group. We actually call them Water Selkie. That's our naming convention for this group. But you can see a timeline of how long we've been tracking this group. So they started back in 2019, September 2019. The emergence of ABCD ransomware, which was the origin of the Lockbit ransomware. So again, you have an organization that maybe it was, somebody set up the group and then, started with ABCD, and then they modified it and created the Lockbit. But in January of 2020, they actually launched a ransomware as a service affiliate program. So one of the things we're seeing for sure in the ransomware arena is the use of affiliates. And if you think about what we were talking about earlier about, the cyber criminals moving up in skill level and professionalism, these affiliate organizations are probably also starting to be run now by these very knowledgeable, very technical and professional criminals. So the ransomware group like Lockbit here, they get these and entice these affiliates to come in and utilize their offering, right? So they are competing in the open market, underground market for other affiliates, right? So they have to be on their game. They have to continually adapt and innovate. We're seeing a lot more innovation and automation being built into a lot of the capabilities that the ransomware gangs are delivering to their affiliates. You see in September of that year, the launch of a leak site and adoption of the double extortion business model. So this is a gang that also saw that the double extortion model of ransomware was working very well. And if you're not familiar with double extortion, what basically they do in their attack is they will initially steal a bunch of critical data from the victim. And then once they've stolen that data and exfiltrated it out to themselves, then they will launch the ransomware. And the ransomware will then go and encrypt the folders and files and so forth on the systems. And if the customer, or the victim, I should say, decides to not pay the ransom to obtain the decryption key, then they come back and they say, well, we stole the data. We're going to publish it on our leak site unless you pay us an extortion fee for that. So that's that double extortion model. So they built that into their program. In June, they released a version Lockbit 2.0 and Steelbit, which were two new pieces of malware that we had to deal with as an industry. In August, you had an attack on Accenture. In October, they released Lockbit version that targeted Linux and VMware ESXi hypervisor platforms. So they're expanding their attack surface as a group. And then in December, they claimed successful breaching of more organizations, but that was actually debunked. So, again, one of the things that they have to do is advertise. So one of the ways to advertise is to tell these affiliates and these other threat actors how good they are and how many groups that they or victims they have victimized. And so they're doing it. But that's good thing is this was debunked. But you can see very professional built organization, obviously regularly innovating, regularly changing their tactics to ensure that they are continue successful profit and business. So why is it so successful? Well, first, their malware performance is strong selling point, right? So the speed with which they use is well known in the underground. The threat group's efforts to publicize their malware capabilities have established it as a ransomware with one of the fastest and most efficient encryption methods. So that's one of the selling points, is that they can encrypt faster than other ransomware malwares. The second thing is it considers external pressures and issues faced by its potential targets. So again, as a ransomware as a service and utilizing affiliates, they are going to look at who to target. In this case, we see them doing a lot in U.S., lucrative targets in the U.S., chances of getting a successful payout. They look at the different industries and which ones would more likely pay. So they do their due diligence in terms of who to target. They bank on their strength of their affiliate program. So, as we mentioned, it was a contributing factor of their success. If it recruits trustworthy and capable affiliates. Evidence also suggests that several of its affiliates were involved in multiple RAS operations, which helps Walter Selke innovate and keep up with the competition. So again, they're funding their through previous attacks, successful attacks, they're funding their business, they're funding their innovation. They pride themselves on their professional operation that can be trusted by the affiliates. We talked about earlier is that, that one group splintered off, but then they have to build back their reputation because they splintered off. This group has been able to maintain their organization quite some time. And it has more in store for the future, right? They clearly are ramped up operations. You'll see that in just a minute here. The intrusion set will either be maintained or increase their level of activity in the first half of 2022, we expect. Organizations should also expect the supply chain attacks in the future, according to an interview conducted with one of their operators. So one of their operators suggested that they will continue to do some supply chain based attacks. When you look at their victims, you can see here, United States was by far the biggest victim group. And this comes from our detection capabilities across our customer base. So these are detections, they're not necessarily infections, but we do see, it gives us a good idea of where they're targeting and who they're targeting. So you can see United States, India, Brazil, Australia, it's all over the world. This group targets victims everywhere. You can also see that they primarily go after healthcare, education, technology, financial, manufacturing, retail. Again, they're all over the map in terms of the industries that they're targeting. But again, that goes to show you that they do their due diligence in terms of who to target and why they should target them. When we look at some of the trends here, you can see in late second half of 2021, we really saw them ramp up, especially in November and December, they started ramping up. As of January, we don't have a lot of data yet. We're still gathering that, but you can see, we'll see if it continues that. We do think that we will see a continued use of them in 2022. Let's look at their life cycle, the attack life cycle now. So, right, this organization mostly gains access via compromised servers or RDP accounts that usually are bought in the underground. So a lot of these affiliates will shop for RDP accounts, compromised RDP accounts, stolen RDP accounts from businesses out there, and they will buy those, and then they'll use those to get access to the victims. Some instances, it's they use spam email or brute force the insecure RDP or VPN credentials. So they're going to do a lot of brute forcing against your accounts. They also have been known to utilize a vulnerability. You can see here with Fortinet's VPN system. So again, you can see a wide range of initial access techniques and tactics being used by this group. So, you know, they'll try one. If it doesn't work, they'll try another. If it doesn't work, they'll try another. They have time on their hands. Now, when you look at the execution of their malware, Lockbit usually executed via command line because it accepts parameters. So you can see, again, these elite hackers, sometimes they will do manual stuff. They will hack at organizations and do things via command line. It also can be executed via created scheduled task. This is usually the case when they propagate it to other machines. So if they build in the capability for the malware to actually, like a worm, to propagate to other systems, then they will set up a scheduled task to launch the malware, the ransomware. And there's also reports of being executed using PowerShell Empire, a pure PowerShell post-exploitation agent. So PowerShell is another one that we see a lot of uses by these criminals. Credential access is something they definitely look to do. You can see besides using it, they also observe, we observe them using Mimikatz to gather credentials from systems as well. So once they're in the network, they will do that. Defense evasion. So what we saw with this group is them looking for tools to disable the security product. So this is an area that we are highly concerned about, that when a customer gets attacked, one of the first things they're going to do is look to utilize some of these tools like Gmerge, PC Hunter, Process Hacker, that will allow them to actually turn off the security agents on these systems that then allow them to plant the malware on it pretty effectively. In some attacks, we've seen group policy being created to disable Windows Defender. So if it's a Windows Defender account, they are also looking at ways to turn that off. Because again, if your security product is not running, it's not going to be effective. So, you know, we'll talk later about some of the defense measures you can do. On the discovery side, you can, you know, this is similar to what a lot of these gangs do. Again, they're very smart. They're very technology savvy. So once they're in the network, they're going to do a scan of the network. They're going to find out what you're running. In this case, they're looking, you know, using network scanner, advanced port scanner, AdFind to find the AD server. And enumerating a lot of the connected machines in the network. So that gives them an understanding of what systems I want to target. So in a ransomware attack, and even in some of the other attacks, what they're going to look for are those critical systems inside your network, that if they bring those down, whether it's through a ransomware infection on the system that renders it difficult to run, or it's a different type of malware, you know, it could be a wiper even that we're hearing about just now. You know, those systems could be taken offline. And if they're taken offline, you're more likely to pay to get them back online. So you can see there, they try to locate domain controllers, Active Directory servers, all of these, all of those are two major servers that they tend to target regularly, especially for credential theft and trying to get an account that is an administrative account on those systems. So next step obviously is lateral movement. So once they're in the network, and again, when they initially access the network, if it's through one of those initial access methods, or even if it's a phishing attack against an employee, they're not going to stop at that system. They're going to quickly, again, map out your network and then laterally move to the places that they need to. In this case, we saw them self-propagate via the SMB connection using obtained credentials. So they're using the looking to steal credentials and use that as lateral movement. Sometimes we see them self-propagate and execute via a group policy. So they set up a group policy and be able to execute that. And then in some instances, PS exec or Cobalt Strike. Again, these are tools that in a lot of cases are used by organizations already. So the living off the land is utilized by this group. Exfiltration, again, they're going to use some tools like Mega or Free File Sync via cloud storage tools that they're going to utilize. Again, they're doing the double extortion. So one of the first things before they drop the ransomware is they're going to do this, identify through the lateral movement, identify those critical systems that have the data that they want to steal. Then they will exfiltrate it using these tools. StealBit is a malware that is sold by this threat actor group. So they developed their own exfiltration tool called StealBit, and they're actually selling that to affiliates and to others to exfiltrate stolen files. So some of the impact that we see on this one, when you think about the actual payload, it'll proceed with encryption routine. They have a good encryption model here because they only encrypt the first 4K kilobytes of the file, and they append a .lockbit to it. So it's a very fast model of encryption, so it can get done very quickly. They'll replace the desktop wallpaper with a note, so their ransom note comes up as a desktop wallpaper. They also send a WOL packet to ensure the network drives are active for network encryption. So again, they want to encrypt the network capabilities. And then also they can print it. So they have the capability to actually print its ransom note using connected printers, using the WinSpool APIs. So they can even just have it print off a copy of the thing for you in case you don't see the note on the system. So that was Lockbit. So that's, again, that group, as you can see from the time they've been around for quite some time. They continue to innovate, they continue to change. They probably are set up similar to what I shared earlier. It's an organization. Now, some of their members may be in different parts of the world or in different parts of a country, but they are going to be working together and to perpetrate these crimes. They may be also working with, like I said, they're working with affiliates who could be located anywhere around the world. They can also be maybe working with access as a service brokers who are working to do initial access to an organization. The next one I wanted to highlight was Revel, which is also Sodinokibi. This is a ransomware family that's been around since 2019. You can see it operated from 2019 to 2021. It is just like Lockbit. They are a ransomware as a service operation. So they have affiliates around the world who are utilizing their tools and malware to target victims out there. They also do a double extortion model, as we saw before. We actually are seeing triple and quadruple extortion. So in a triple extortion model is besides stealing data and then maybe doing the encryption, before the encryption, they may do a DDoS attack inside the organization. So they'll bring down some systems, and they will extort you for that. And then the quadruple one that we saw last year is where in the stolen data, in many cases, they will have your customer information. And there we're starting to see them contact your customers. And when they contact your customers, they do that so that and tell them to put pressure on you to pay the ransom so their data doesn't get leaked. So that's a pretty nasty model as well. They are known to do the software supply chain attacks. So you can see they were linked to the Kaseya attack, JBS and Quanta attacks. In Kaseya, that was a software supply chain attack where they were able to infiltrate and compromise the Kaseya software that was installed in many victims out there around the world. And they used them as a pivot, basically an island hop or a way to hop over to their customers and use and attack them. They were also linked to the Dark Side group, which performed the Colonial Pipeline attack. Now, they did announce their return in September of 2021, but by October 2021, the Revel data leak program had become inaccessible. So they were certainly, some of their infrastructure was being taken down. They also terminated their affiliate program. And then Russia announced on January 14th of this year, they arrested a number of Revel members. But, you know, are they gone? Are they done? You know, we will continue to monitor and see if the likelihood is that, you know, again, if they're an organization like we saw before, there is probably, you know, some of those members were probably not arrested. So we may see them form a new group. They may stay as Revel and just recruit new members. Hard to say. We'll have to, time will tell. You can see on the victim side, the United States was by far the biggest attack where they were attacking the most. Again, a lot of these organizations realize that the American businesses are profitable. They have lots of money. They can pay these very large ransoms potentially. You can see on the right-hand side, the industry that was targeted most was transportation, but also financial was in there as well. Let's look at some of the attack lifecycle stuff. So you can see here, they hire a variety of affiliates for their initial access. You know, they used mail spam, spear phishing links, RDP access for, you know, use of valid accounts, compromised websites, exploits, all of these different ways they utilize to get into the organization. So again, it's just it's a plethora of tactics that they will utilize. It just depends on what works at which victim. But you're going to see this followed by a lot of them. In the binary, you know, in the payloads, we see PowerShell, we see cert util, we see macros being utilized, all sorts of stuff. When you look at the download and execution side of their attack, again, looking at utilizing some older vulnerabilities. So again, not always are we going to see the 0 days being used. The older vulnerabilities, in this case, 2019 CVEs, were successfully used by them. So not 0 day, but end day vulnerabilities are used quite often by these groups. A mail spam led to a macro virus, macro malware. That basically executed Revel and also downloaded Quackbot. Drive-by compromise directly led to Revel. So drive-by compromise, if you're not familiar with that, that's where you know, an employee just goes to a website. They've compromised that website and it downloads the Revel onto their system. We also saw DLL side loading being used with a legitimate executable. So they used a legitimate executable and then had that basically work with a legitimate installer, and it was then, it dropped their custom installer called Soda Install. And then also another CVE, a 2021 CVE that was tied to the Kaseya VSA servers was used in that attack. On the lateral movement, just like before, we saw them use RDP, we saw PS exec. These were both used in their lateral movement capabilities. On the defense evasion, again, they're all looking to evade detection. And in this case, PC Hunter, process hacker was used to turn off and either delete or turn off the security products that were running on those systems. Kill AV was a custom malicious binary that they designed to uninstall AV related products. It would query the uninstall registry and uninstall the program associated with it. It terminated processes to the list. One of the new variants included a safe boot routine. So it triggered the when -S mode was supplied as an argument. You can see new variants created a run once registry to restart or from a safe mode and bypass security solutions that could not work in a safe mode model. They also did side loading, DLL side loading, as I mentioned. You can see that. And then the Kaseya supply chain attack, they used PowerShell commands to disable Windows Defender. So again, this group used multiple different tools. Discovery. So this is discovering what, as they do the network scan, they want to discover that, again, this group used AdFind, Sharpsploit, Bloodhound, NBT scanned. All these tools were being used by them. A command and control was being set up. I didn't have that on the last one, Lockbit, but they definitely handled command and control infrastructure to deal with it. But you can see here some information about it, some of the details of it. And again, you'll get these slides so you can take a look. Credential access and exfiltration was used by this group. So Sharpsploit was observed as a tool to use. They also gathered information and sent it back to the actors via a number of different things. So FileZilla, for example, was used to do an FTP transfer. Megasync, free file sync, rclone, 64-bit version of rclone was also used to exfiltrate the data again. And they are a double extortion, as I mentioned. So they're going to steal data before they execute the malware. And you can see here on the impact thing, this kind of goes through the actual ransomware impact when it runs, the malware runs and is successfully run. You can see a number of things here that, they'll share they'll encrypt the files. They will not encrypt certain file types. So there is a list of those. They check the keyboard layout for language. And again, if it's in certain language, a certain list of countries, it does not execute, which maybe gives you some information about where it might be coming from, but I would not trust that. And then they delete backups and they'd report to their command and control. So let's move on to some of the defense strategies. And again, if you have questions, certainly put it in the Q&A or into the chat, and I'll be taking those here in just a minute. So there's a couple of things we want to look at when we think about defense, right? The first thing is auditing and inventory. And this kind of falls under that whole area called attack surface discovery. This is an area that getting a lot of press and talk about now, where, if you can't see it, you don't know about it, it's going to be hard to defend it. So as an organization, hopefully you can take an inventory of your assets and data. You can identify authorized and unauthorized devices and software. You can make an audit of events and incident logs. These are some things that you can do to help identify. And I would just say, when you're looking at attack surface discovery, Obviously, your internal network is important, but even more important is your external attack surface. And what is your internet-facing systems that are in infrastructure are the ones that are going to probably be targeted first and foremost, because those are the ones that they can discover very easily through tools like Shodan, search tools. So definitely audit and inventory. Configure and monitor, right? So manage hardware and software configuration. So when you're looking at you're configuring your systems, make sure you're configuring them with the best practice. So get with your vendor, whether it's your security vendor, whether it's your regular application vendor, but talk to them about their best practices. What are the best configurations you can do? Misconfigurations are one of the biggest challenges we have right now, especially with the newer technology that's out there, like cloud infrastructure and Kubernetes, for example, and so forth. So make sure that. Also, grant admin privileges and access only when necessary to an employee's role. So again, that credential theft is big. That's going to be used against you all the time. And so if you can ensure that you are, hang on, I gotta, yeah. So grant, monitor network ports, protocols, and services, especially your external facing ones. Take a look at that and then turn those off if they don't have to be running on those systems. Activate security configurations on network infrastructure devices like firewalls and routers. And establish software allow lists that execute a legitimate application. So app control and whitelisting, as we used to call it, is a form of a very good form now. It's something that every organization should start looking into, especially on your servers, so that if any other applications or executables try to run, they won't be able to. Patch and update. So again, we talked about all those, end days and 0 days. So you want to conduct regular vulnerability assessments, do a risk-based assessment of your applications, which ones are critical to you, which application, which operating systems. Based on that, you want to put together a list of which ones you absolutely have to patch when the patches come out. You might want to look at virtual patching to help you with that process, but also look at any new vulnerabilities that disclosed. Look to see if it has a public proof of concept code available, or if it's actively being exploited in the wild. Those are the types of vulnerabilities that you absolutely do need to patch immediately, or actually have a virtual patch associated with it. And then update software and applications to the latest versions, especially your security software. It's only as good as the latest version. In a lot of cases, new detection technologies are put into the new versions of the security software. So if you don't have that latest version, you may not have access to that latest advanced detection capability. Protect and recover. So implement some data protection, backups. Obviously, for ransomware, backup is big. Make sure one of those backups is offline, because again, they're going to look to target online backups and encrypt those. Also enable multi-factor authentication. This is absolutely critical, especially for your critical accounts, your Active Directory accounts, your Exchange server accounts, Office 365 accounts. Make sure that you have those multi-factor authentications, because if they do, for some reason, brute force the logon credentials, at least that two-factor will not allow them to gain access. Secure and defend. So look at sandbox. Sandbox technology does work. It can, if a new, for example, if a new attachment is coming in an email, you can send it to a sandbox and let that sandbox explode and see if it's malicious or not before it gets delivered to the end user. Deploy the latest versions, I mentioned that. Detect early signs. This is a big one. So a lot of cases, like I said, there's a lot of activity happening before the ransomware deployment. Ransomware is the last executable that's going to happen in an attack, because it's the most visible. there's going to be a lot of activity beforehand. You know, if you have tools that you utilize inside your organization, monitor those tools. If there are tools that you know are being used by criminals and you don't use them in your organization, but you all of a sudden you see it being used, that's a good indicator that you may have been breached. So look at those early warning signs of these things. And this is where, as we move to more of a campaign-based or actor-based view of things, we can start supplying organizations and customers with information about these groups or these attack campaigns. So, for example, if it's Lockbit, we can give you the information about what types of malware you may see early on, and if you detect that, you then know that you may have Lockbit inside your account. And then train and test, right? Regularly train and assess employees, their security skills, build a security awareness program that you run regularly with your users, your employees, everybody's in it. Conduct red team and pen tests as well. So that's all I had today. I did want to highlight, though, that we'd love to chat with you about our capability in this area. You can see here with our Trend Micro 1, which is the Cloud 1, Network 1, Workforce 1, and Vision 1. We do some discover attack surface discovery. We assess risk, and we can apply security to your systems to help mitigate that. All right, I'm going to start taking some questions here. Once the ransom is paid, are corporations truly ever safe again? Well, that's the $1,000,000 question. The challenge you have, obviously, is once you pay the ransom. Now, it behooves the ransomware actors to actually get you the decryption key. Because if their reputation gets out there, like Lockbit, for example, if the reputation of Lockbit is that they don't deliver the decryption key, then no one's going to pay the ransom. So it behooves them to give that. But here's the big but: if they've stolen data and they extort you for that data, and they say, well, we will not disclose it, we won't publish it if you pay us the extortion fee. What's stopping them from? They're probably not going to delete it, right? They could sell it in the underground to somebody else. They can do whatever they want. Also, if your organization is in the news and they're told, and the news says that you paid the ransom, now you just put a big target on your back that you are an organization that will pay a ransom. So you'll probably get other ransomware groups and affiliates targeting your organization. So it is going to be a challenge for sure. And you need to take as much steps as you can to stop. I'm going to look at the chat now. There's a lot of stuff in the chat, so I apologize if I don't get to your thing. We only have a couple of minutes. Let's see, a bunch of people about sound. Hopefully you could hear me. I apologize if you couldn't. Yeah, you got the blog. We will be sending out this deck, the slides to you, as well as a link to the recorded session. So you'll be able to take a look at that if you couldn't watch the whole thing, or if you have peers that you like, think would be work, that would be good. A lot of this is just comments. I appreciate my audience here putting in the comments, because you all are very knowledgeable and smart, and I appreciate you doing that. Let's see, with the global situation that's happening, and groups arrested in their favor to attack the global economy. So, obviously, we're in a very interesting time right now, and a lot of the governments have published guidance to businesses out there. I recommend that you look at, if you're US, for example, go to the CISA website. They've got good guidance and guidelines. If you're in another country, you can do that. We've got a knowledge base article on our support portal that has some links to a number of different government sites that have guidance for you. I'd recommend you do that. Obviously, Shields Up came out with CISA, so everybody should be on high alert at this point in time, because we just don't know what's going to happen. But that's, it seems to be something every time. Everybody's got to be on alert all the time. When using RMM tools, how can we protect our computers and clients? From attack of vulnerability on these tools. So when you're using tools, obviously it's software. So again, make sure you keep them up to date. Make sure you get the latest patches. 0 days are a little tougher to deal with because obviously it's an unknown vulnerability that's being exploited. So, but there's other mitigating things that you can do, like I mentioned before. Getting visibility into early warnings of activity, right? If you can't catch the vulnerability, the exploit that's being used, hopefully you maybe be able to detect and block the ransomware that gets dropped, or the command and control server can be identified, and you can block the communications to that. There's a lot of other, and that's why you need a layered solution. So we'd love to talk to you about that. We have capabilities that can help you there. I think that's all that I have. I know we're at the end of the hour, so I want to thank everybody for joining me today. I will be doing another one of these next month. We will announce the title and time and date shortly. But thank you for participating today. I wish everybody safe and healthy lives, and let's keep our prayers for the folks over in Eastern Europe, that they stay safe and healthy as well. So thank you, everybody. You have a great day. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.